Hey, Fedheads, welcome back to another episode of Sharing Our Pairings. This is episode number 153 or 154. I just typed in. I don't remember. It's 153. We're going to be smoking the Flores E. Rodriguez Connecticut Valley Reserve Azul, which is the one with the blue label here that my camera just will not focus on. Come on, camera. Let's do this. Showtime. There we go. So this is the Flores E. Rodriguez Azul, and sit down, grab a cigar, and let's do it. All right, Fedheads, we're back. Getting ready for Sharing Our Pairings 153 here. We're broadcast, of course, around the world on the Armed Forces Radio Network, live on Facebook, available on YouTube or whatever your favorite podcast catcher is. I admit I'm a little behind on the YouTube and the podcast, so you're probably hearing this a couple weeks late if that's the way you listen to it. And I apologize, but I got a busy life, and editing is a lot harder than I ever expected it to be. It's not easy, man.
No, definitely not.
It's way more time consuming than I ever thought, especially like exporting videos. Like that's the most time consuming part, which was always surprising to me. But anyway, we're smoking the Flores E. Rodriguez here. Let me see if I can get it to focus again there. Cover up every part of my face. There we go. It's got like the wrapper on this thing is gorgeous, dude. So the wrapper on this, I wasn't going to talk about the specifics of the cigar yet, since I have barely even smoked it. But if you're not familiar, this is a cigar made by Pinar del Rio. Mr. Abe Flores is making those. You can kind of see there. Mine, I think, had a little bit of mold. I wiped it off, but
I think they call those flavor crystals.
Yeah, that happens sometimes. So I'm not faulting them for that. This has a Connecticut broadleaf rosado wrapper, which is that's kind of that color that you see. It's got I don't know if I would quite call this rosado, but rosado is usually when it's got kind of a pinkish hue, and this is, I wouldn't call it pinkish, but it's lighter than you would normally see.
Yeah.
Broadleaf Maduro. The other version of this that you may see, like Dennis and I were both confused because this has a blue label, and I didn't realize that there were two different lines. There's the red and the blue. The red one is a Connecticut Broadleaf Maduro. It's kind of a medium-bodied cigar. This is the Connecticut Broadleaf Blue, or the Valley Reserve Blue, and it's got like I said, a Connecticut Broadleaf Rosado wrapper. It's a little bit stronger. The binder's from Jalapa, Nicaragua. The filler is Dominican Corojo and Condega Criollo, which, of course, is in Nicaragua as well. Interestingly, these come in two different packaging forms. They come in. They had a limited edition run that is still available, at least in the couple of places that I looked, of 19-count ceramic jars that are really nice looking. They're kind of black jars with this big blue lid. It's nice looking. Or 15-count wooden boxes, which is kind of the presentation we're used to seeing. We're smoking the 6.5 by 52 Figurado, which retails for $19. So this is kind of one of their ultra premium offerings, if you will. What do you think of the cigar so far, Dennis?
It smells fantastic. First thing I said when I lit it up, just smells so good. And it's got that, I don't want to call it just yet, but it has kind of a little pepperiness to it. And not in a traditional sort of in-your-face blast of pepper.
I'll see what you mean in a moment when I finally get to smoking it.
It'll come.
I just had to relight because I talked so much at the top there for 5 minutes straight that I let it go out. So before we get into the our pairings here, and while I kind of smoke the cigar a little bit more, I wanted to talk about IPCPR. It's coming up. We are exactly a month away. It's in 4 weeks and like 2 days it starts.
I'm pumped.
Yeah, it's really exciting. This is going to be Dennis's first year, which, I mean, I'm kind of throwing you under the bus here, but what are you expecting from IPCPR?
You know what? I've seen previous years and I've heard about previous years. I think everybody is really just going to step it up in a very different way than what we all expect from them. So I expect to see a lot of weird stuff that's different and new, and people just kind of really pushing it.
I'm excited to see what the trends are this year, because like that's something I look for every time is like what is the thing that like every other booth has, and sometimes it's something weird like I don't know, live music at the booths or something, because that's happened before. Usually it's
behind
like
the booth.
I mean that happened in a couple of booths last year. Like Drew Estate had an entire segment of their booth dedicated as a bar for tasting their liquors, since they were pretty new last year. But most of the time it's a cigar kind of trend where we see a specific size, a specific wrapper, a specific style. Sometimes it's like limited editions with cool boxes or something like that. So I'm excited to see what it is, since companies are just starting to announce. I think I've gotten 3 press releases this week that were basically, here's what we're going to be announcing. We won't give you any details yet, but this is what we're going to talk about when we get there. But I want to talk also about our IPCPR coverage. So, of course, we're going to be doing the coverage we always do that you guys are used to. I'm going to be there interviewing people. We're going to be getting, the standard, what you're used to seeing, edited videos of those, and then we'll have the B-roll a couple months later. But we're going to be doing something new, because we're not expecting our editing is not going to be as quick as it has been in previous years. We're not going to get everything up the same year or the same week necessarily. We'll probably have stuff trickling out, but it won't be like it was before. We're getting stuff up the same day that the interview happened. But what we're going to do that's new is we're going to have some Facebook Live going on. So we're going to have us, which is like the traditional video team, me and Dennis, and then we're going to have Jason and Jared, who I'm sure you all know Jason. You may or may not know Jared. He doesn't make it on camera very often. He shies away from the camera a little bit. But they're going to be our Facebook Live team, which I'm really excited about. They're going to be doing live booth tours. I'm hoping that they get time to like stop by some of the smaller booths that we don't necessarily like get an interview in at, or some of the bigger booths where we can't get an interview in, like Padron and stuff like that, where they're just too busy for media because they're selling too many cigars. But I think that'll be really cool, and we're going to try to do like end of day updates where we're kind of the whole team together talking about excuse me, the whole team together talking about what we saw that day, who we talked to, stuff like that. Maybe what we're on our way to that evening. Because as happens with IPCPR, our schedule is filling right up. Like we've already got Saturday basically booked from like 4 p.m. on, which I mean that's the way the show goes. You end up it's a very busy. Ed Ryan wants to know if we're betting on who's going to show up with no cigars due to the issues in Nicaragua. I mean, couldn't have come at a worse time, because this is like the week where people are getting their final shipments of cigars, making sure they're going to be ready to smoke at the show. I don't know if I want to bet who, because I don't want to say that anybody's going to do it, but I think we're going to see a couple people. And a previous trend that we've seen, I don't know if I would even call this a trend. A couple people in the last few years have been, we can't give out samples anymore because of the FDA, and it's like, well, you definitely 100% can, but they don't want to because it costs them money. Which I understand. If they said we're not giving out samples this year, I'd be fine with it. But saying it's because of the FDA is kind of what makes that kind of weird. And I feel like those kinds of people have the best excuse now, where they can say, we had samples for you, but they all got caught up in Nicaragua, and they're stuck on the Pan American Highway right now.
Hopefully everybody makes it, though.
Yeah, I think I'm expecting everybody to make it. I don't think it's so bad that anybody's going to completely miss the show, but I mean, it's possible. We'll see. I'm certainly nervous about how that situation might escalate between now and then. I mean, it could get worse. It could get a little better. I don't know. But I'm just worried about the whole situation down there. But I wanted to give you guys a heads up so you're not too disappointed when our YouTube isn't filled with videos during that week. But if you don't normally follow us on Facebook, make sure you give us a follow or a like or whatever it's called, and we'll have live updates for you from the show floor, which I think will be pretty cool. Hopefully there's enough bandwidth to sustain all that, or we may end up uploading videos 10 or 15 minutes after they happen. So I'm just pouring my first whiskey here because I didn't get a chance to do that before. So my first whiskey, which we have a bottle down here. I just polished this guy off. It only had a little bit left, but I was saving it because it's one of my favorite whiskeys, and it's not super hard to find, but it's not easy to find. This is Old Weller Antique 107. So people who are not familiar with Old Weller Antique should go buy some immediately. But to give you some background on it, it's made by Buffalo Trace. It's named after W.L. Weller, who he kind of... I don't know if he was the first guy who ever did it, but I know he popularized wheated bourbons, which, bourbons are kind of traditionally mostly corn. I mean, they have to be mostly corn, but traditionally they're almost all corn with a little bit of rye or a little bit of barley. And he introduced the wheated element to it, which is where you distill it from a wheat spirit, partially. So I think as far as I know, they've never released the entire mash bill on this. I think it's something like 15% wheated, or 15% wheat, rather. The thing that makes it a big deal and the reason it's hard to find is because Buffalo Trace also makes the Weller 12-year, of course, the Weller Special Reserve, but then also the William LaRue Weller, William LaRue Weller, which is what W.L. Weller stands for, which is one of their like highly allocated bourbons. It's like one of those ones that when the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection comes out, people go crazy for it. You know, they have lotteries to be able to buy it. Some people go crazy with the prices and stuff like that.
Oh,
they wait in line all night.
I've heard the stories. It gets nuts.
I mean, I've seen bottles of this. Like this, I think I paid $26 a bottle for this, and I've seen it upwards of $100. Which is crazy.
Easily. Especially if you look at the East Coast.
Yeah. And the other bourbon that they also make with reportedly the same mash, but I've heard conflicting stories on whether it's aged in the same warehouses or not, is Pappy Van Winkle, which is like kind of the holy grail of bourbon for a lot of people because of its rarity. It's just so limited, and which has made, I mean, it got popular, but part of the reason it's popular is because it's so limited. And they just refuse to make more of it because they just don't want to up production and diminish its value, even though they're not making more money off of all of the, the third party sellers. If they had their way, everybody would pay $50 for the Pappy 10, which if you could find a bottle for $50, like,
that is really the holy grail.
You should buy a lottery,
especially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's one of my favorite bourbons. Like I said, the 107, of course, means that it's 107 proof. Ed Ryan says, do you want to talk about the bottle? I don't know if there's much to talk about with the bottle. Is there? As far as I know, there's not a whole lot to talk about. It used to come in this funny little bottle. Recently, they've kind of made it a little thinner where like this top section is shorter and this big bulb goes up higher. So it's like got kind of a slimmer appearance, but I don't know. Let me know what you think there is to talk about the bottle while Dennis talks to us about his next pairing, or his first pairing rather. He's drinking out of a wine glass.
I've been pairing all day. Well, I wanted to because of the style of the first beer that I'm having tonight. I really wanted to get an appropriate glass, and I have one, but I couldn't find it. So the closest thing that I could get was technically sort of a wine glass, but not really. This is a...
it's really a tulip glass.
Yeah, it's a green flash glass that I got a while back. But my first pairing is kind of strange for me because it's not a style that I really ever go to. I don't gravitate toward any of their anybody's beers of this particular style. I don't dislike it. It's just not my favorite. And it's a Hefeweizen, which is not something that I don't think I've ever had it on the show either.
I don't.
But the label is kind of cool. Wise Guys, Hefeweizen from New Jersey, Cypress Brewing Company. And, excuse me. And it is really that, even though it's a local brewery and it's a small setup, they've only got, their setup is about 20 barrel system.
Wow, that's really small.
So it's really, really tiny, very local. They still pump out a ton of beer. They're always just cranking away at it. And honestly, as a Hefeweizen, it really does stick true to the style. And it has a lot of that classic, easy drinking, kind of crisp, not a lot of hop note to it, and tons of that clove, the banana and the clove. And that's sort of where I fall through and I'm not a huge fan of, but I can always tell if it's well done. And American Hefs are always hard because they generally have more hops, right? Mm-hmm. Compared to the German. But the wheat character is phenomenal in this, and I think it's so far it's pretty good. I don't want to jinx it, but so far it's pretty good. Starting nice and light with a 4.9% beer, which is unusual for me because I normally, I jump into the really heavy stuff quick. Yeah, the wheat really comes out. And in Germany, for a Hefeweizen to be really based on German beer law, it has to be at least 50% wheat.
Yeah. And Ed Ryan says he was referring to the bottle at IPCPR. Which bottle at IPCPR? There were a lot of bottles there. There were a lot of bottles. An extreme amount of bottles. But I'm drinking my Old Weller 107. I'll hold it up here so you can see that nice dark bourbon color.
That's beautiful.
I forgot to mention this is no age statement. I think the general consensus is that it's something like 7 years old, 7, 8. But of course, the minimum age is basically, I don't remember if this is a Kentucky straight. Yes, this is Kentucky straight bourbon, so it has to be at least 2 years old or 4 years old. I don't remember off the top of my head. But man, I love this bourbon. It's 107 proof, but it doesn't come off that way, which is what, 53.5% ABV. It doesn't taste like it at all. It's so smooth, and it's got like this really rich oaky character that I really like. And then it finishes with just a little bit of spice, but it's got like such a smoothness to the mouthfeel. Cigar in the bottle. Yeah, we'll talk. I'll mention that in a moment.
Cigar in the bottle?
Yeah.
I want to know what's going on. Sounds good.
Yeah. No. I'll talk about that in a second. This Old Weller just goes so well with Connecticut Broadleaf. Like, the smoothness, because Connecticut Broadleaf kind of has that, like, intense sweetness and a little bit of spice, but it's really, like, just so earthy and smooth. Which I know, I hate the word smooth, but I feel like that's the best way to describe it in this case.
Yeah, I think it's more of a smoothness than a cream necessarily, which I think a lot of times also gets confused.
I'm trying to think if there's a better way to describe it. There's an interesting sour note that I get from the cigar. Are you getting that?
I got it before a little bit, but now because of my next pairing, I don't want to say yet, but I think it could be my beer.
Okay, so we'll talk about Cigar in the Bottle. So I told Ed this the other day when we were hanging out smoking cigars. The Cigar in the Bottle guys, like, I knew that the Cigar in the Bottle existed, but I didn't know that it was still around or anything. I remember it from when they did an Opus X that was in a bottle years and years ago, like a decade ago. And this guy just like runs up and grabs me and is like yelling at me, "Have you heard about the Cigar in the Bottle?" And he pulled us over there and we were like, "All right, I guess we'll do an interview with you." It was just strange. I'm trying to get a better read on the cigar here. And we're going to take a quick break to talk about one of our sponsors. This segment is brought to you by the Cigar Federation store. They got a whole bunch of Illusione stuff in this week. They've got some of the newer, like the 2017 production of the Illusione Singulares. They got some Cruzados. But then they got those new one-offs. I'm really excited to try those one-offs. I ordered some today. For those who don't know, one-off is a brand that was around 10 years ago is when they were popular, and they just kind of slowly faded away. And last year, Don Giolito acquired the rights to the brand and spent, I assume, a ridiculous amount of time blending them because he wanted to get it as close to the original as possible. But as far as I know, he didn't have the recipes or the blends, rather. And they are out now, and they're priced a little high. But I mean, they've always been kind of they were always kind of a Davidoff competitor. So I think it makes sense. And of course, they're all predicate blends because they were released prior to 2007. So I think so. I guess it was like 12 or 13 years ago when they were popular. But I think that's a good move for Dion, and I hope the cigars live up to it. Man, I think you were right. There's like a white pepper spice to this cigar, but it's really, really subtle. Like it appears and then it's
very
gone.
light.
It's not one of those spices that sits on your tongue. And I don't know if I would even call it light because it's not like it's not like it's hard to taste or hard to detect. But you taste it and then it's gone as soon as you like
immediately. Yeah. Exactly.
I'm surprised by how clean the finish is because traditionally Connecticut broadleaf has a pretty like long, and it tends to be kind of heavy on your palate, and I don't find that with this cigar at all.
No, I'm the same. It's very quick, and I don't want to say clean necessarily, but it is that very short. It doesn't coat the tongue the same way, and almost a mild for me. I thought it would be a lot heftier in general, not just in the flavor and the strength.
And it's really got like the smoke tastes almost oily, like it's a really thick, heavy smoke. But again, as soon as you like blow it out,
that's it.
Almost gone. There's a little bit of like earthiness left on the tongue, but that's about it. And I'm going to get into my next pairing here. So this is, I tried to hold on to this long enough, or I tried to pour it with the right amount of time so you'd be able to see the color change. But this is a beer called Fields of Green from, if you watched the show before, one of my favorites, Fort George. Fields of Green is a really interesting beer because it's never the same. It's a fresh hop. It's their fresh hop beer, and every batch they make is different. They always do something different, or sometimes they do the same recipe with different hops. I had one fairly recently. I think it was, I guess it was not that recent. It was about 6 months ago, like somewhere in December or January. And there were literal chunks of hops. Like little bits of hops floating around in there.
That's
and it
fantastic.
was just so oozing with like hop flavor. It was amazing. And you can't really see it here, but you can see that design, how it's got like a circle in there. That circle stays yellow, and the entire rest of the yellow turns green when it's cold. And the reason that they say that is because it's fresh hop. So you need to keep it cold or it's going to go bad. I mean, that's how fresh hop beers work. If they sit out and they get warm, the hops immediately start degrading. This is 7.6% ABV. This particular release, I don't know if you'll be able to read that or not, is titled Eleanor. I don't think there we go. So they give each release a name. I've got a bunch of detail about it here. And another interesting thing about this is they don't have like a release schedule for it. It doesn't come out every February or, every June or something like that. It comes out when they get a bunch of fresh hops at the brewery. This one is released in 4-pack color-changing cans, as they all are. They come out at the brewery first with a limit of 1 case, which is, I don't know. Is that?
What is that? I think 6 4-packs.
Yeah, I think it's 6 4-packs or 4 6-packs. That sounds right. but limit one case per customer. The cool thing that they do is they release stuff like this at the brewery first, and then it's all over the state a little bit later. So this one is codenamed Eleanor. The hops are Hallertau Blanc, Meridian, Idaho 7, and Mosaic. The malt bill is really interesting. 2-row barley, Pilsner, flaked wheat, white wheat, oat malt, and flaked oats.
Interesting.
And the yeast is juice yeast, which I've never heard of.
Juice yeast. Yeah, I don't think I've heard of it either.
It's like I tried to adjust my camera so that you could get the full effect of the color, but it's almost like Dayglow orange. It's bright orange, and it's got that kind of milky consistency to it, or at least visually. It's got that kind of creaminess to it, where it looks just creamy, I guess. It's opaque. It's not clear and it's not cloudy. It's opaque. Which, I mean, that part you kind of can get on the camera. It's just one solid color. So I'm going to take a couple sips of this while you drink your next beer and see how it goes with this cigar. I'm not sure it'll go great since it's pretty hoppy.
Yeah, I'm starting to get nervous about my hop pairings. But my next pairing I'm completely fascinated by. It's such a weird beer, and I think I figured out why. Let me show you the can first and talk a little bit about the brewery, which unfortunately there isn't a lot of information on. But this beer comes from Equilibrium. These guys are up in Middletown, New York, and it's a double IPA, and it's called Vulgar Display of Flower. And man, it is like.
So does that mean it's fresh hops?
I'm assuming. I couldn't figure it out, but I feel like it might be. Their whole thing with this is that it's supposed to be very hoppy and bitter and kind of that classic IPA style. Mm-hmm. And it sort of looks like, I mean, it's not like a hazy IPA by any means. You can still sort of see through it a little bit, not too much. But the thing that really got me on this, and it's the immediate flavor. I took a sip, and I didn't get any of that bitterness. I didn't get any of that insane oil from the hops. Mm-hmm. I got this like wild flavor of almost something sour. And I had to, I kind of had to think about it a little bit. And I realized that the hops that they use for this are these weird tropical sort of very fruity hops that essentially, they don't provide too much bitterness, but what you end up getting is tons of aroma out of them. And just smelling the beer, it's weird. It smells exactly like an apple Jolly Rancher. Exactly. It's so strange.
I love how specific an apple Jolly Rancher is.
But in a really cool way. One of the hops that they used ends up having this really intense lime flavor, and I'm definitely getting that. It just really pops out.
I feel like you brainwashed me by talking about that because I feel like mine tastes a little bit like lime. I think it's more
sour,
of like yeah, I think it's probably more of like a blood orange kind of orange grapefruit citrusiness. But this is like there is an immense amount of fruit in here. I feel like the wheat kind of helps that a little bit. And I didn't mean for wheat to be the theme for my first two pairings here because I didn't even realize the malt bill of the beer.
Unexpected magic.
But it really like rounds out the flavor, and the oats help too. Like you end up with this IPA that's hoppy, but it's like so sweet in a fruity way. It reminds me of, a lot of like the East Coast style Northeast IPAs that are getting popular now. But this is just a really good expression of it, I think. It's not overly fruity like some of them are. Like some of them are just like, it tastes almost like you're drinking peach juice.
Yeah.
Where they're just, it's all sweetness and creaminess, and there's not a lot of like hop character to it. This one you get both, which I kind of like. You get the like that sweet fruitiness of the I would call it orange and grapefruit with a little bit of like that peach and mango kind of stone fruit sweetness. but then it's got like this heavy finish of hops that I really like. I don't know how well it goes with the cigar yet because I'm trying to smoke my cigar, but I keep talking too much.
Yeah, I'm a little bit on the fence with that as well. I don't know. I think maybe an IPA of any kind may not necessarily be the best pairing for this cigar.
Yeah, I feel like it's really covering up like that creamy flavor and the I still get a little bit of that funky sourness left on my tongue. And it really, like, it completely eliminated the spice. I don't taste any spice on my tongue at all now.
What about lactose? Is there lactose in the beer as well, or no?
Not that they say. I mean, it doesn't really taste like lactose. It doesn't have as much creaminess as lactose would usually.
It's rare to find a beer without lactose these days, too, especially if you're looking at the hazy side of things.
I mean, it's hard to find a beer with lactose here.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's all we have on the East Coast.
There's a couple of breweries that use lactose, but most of them don't yet. And I think Fort George has a little bit, but I don't believe this beer has it. I'm tempted to take another sip, but I don't want to like ruin my palate.
Man, Fort George has some great stuff. I know you sent me a couple of cans. It's so good.
Yeah, they're one of the breweries I'll probably bring a 4-pack or 2 to IPCPR, for just to
medicinal purposes.
To try to get some opinions on it, because I don't really know how to feel about it, so I need somebody to tell me how to feel. I'm gonna pour my next pairing here while we're talking. I want to smoke a little bit more of this cigar before I move on, though. I don't know if I want to pair it with the IPA anymore, but I definitely want to smoke a little bit more and try to get a feel for it, because I feel like look how slow I've been smoking. It's crazy.
Oh, man.
Like an inch in. Been smoking this like 40 minutes.
My usual. I'm getting to the end.
Yeah.
And it's been tunneling for a while, and I think it's finally starting to even out.
What do you think of
that's
the
also
size?
because I smoke very quickly.
What do you think of the size? 6.5 Salomon.
You know, I have a soft spot for Salomons in general.
You might still even see the shape.
I think it's a cool shape, and it depending on the type of tobacco that you find, basically depending on the filler, really, you can have a really phenomenal smoke in that shape. It can really bring out a lot of the flavors from the tobacco.
Yeah. With PDR, Pinar del Rio, the factory that makes this, I feel like for me, a lot of their cigars, like, I don't know. I feel like the way that I feel about it is that my palate, it feels like they are just underaged. Their tobacco. It tastes under-fermented to me. I get a lot of that, like, those cloying flavors that kind of stick to your tongue, like some ammonia and some cloying bitterness and stuff like that sticks to your tongue that indicates to me that it's underaged or under-fermented. With this cigar, I don't get that at all. I mean, this tastes like old tobacco to me.
Yeah, and it even smells like it, too. And I'm kind of the same with them. With a lot of their cigars, I'm hit or miss. And this one I've really liked so far.
Me too. It's got a lot more elegance than I'm used to seeing from them. So I think I might need to try more of these. I know my one of my local shops actually has one of their house cigars is one of these, an exclusive size or something like that. I don't know if it's the red label or the blue label, but I'm definitely going to give it another look next time I'm in there. So now I'm going to talk about my final pairing. Right before we get into our last break, probably finish talking about it about the time for our last break. So this is I've had it on the show recently, and I apologize. I cannot stop drinking this, and I'm trying to like relegate it to the show. So any chance I get, I'm like, well, I gotta have a glass of that. This is Ohishi whiskey. So this is a Japanese whiskey that's very, very interesting. I'm really interested to see how it pairs with this cigar because I think it's going to go really well. They were founded in 1872, which is pretty old for a Japanese distillery. That's before, it's before anybody was making whiskey in Japan. Japan didn't start making whiskey until, I I think like 1919, I believe, is when
that
they
was
started
much later.
issuing whiskey licenses. But it's because this place normally, I mean, they're primarily known for making sake and sochu. I assume that in the 50 years between when they were founded and when whiskey started, started rising up in Japan, they were just making some version of sake or sochu. They're in southwest Japan near the village of Mizukami. And now we get to the part that makes this whiskey super interesting. 30% of the mash bill, I guess you would call it, of what they use to distill this, or rather what they ferment and then distill into this, 30% of it is rice that they grow on their own estates. And one of the really interesting things about that is in the rice paddies, I mean, everybody's seen a rice paddy before. We've seen them in Nicaragua. There's a lot of rice paddies.
Yeah.
You end up with like maybe a foot or a foot and a half of water that the rice kind of sits, or that the plants kind of grow through. So they're in the soil, but then they grow through the water and out. And they actually, for pest control and weed control, they actually use koi fish, which is pretty baller.
That's awesome.
The other 70% of the mash bill is mochi rice, which is it's sometimes referred to as candy rice. It's a very, very sweet, very sticky rice that mochi is typically a kind of candy that you can get. It's kind of like it's the consistency of gummy bears, kind of, or like gummy worms. But
yeah,
it's actually
hard to describe, right?
Yeah, but it's actually just rice that they smash. They basically macerate the rice in sort of a mortar and pestle, and what they end up with is this gummy paste that they color and flavor, and that's what mochi is. They coat it with a little bit of rice flour to keep it from being super sticky. But that's what mochi rice is primarily used for, and it's very high in sugar compared to other rices. So they put all that into a pot still, but it's actually all stainless steel, which, as John and I have talked about a couple times, stainless steel is very, very rare for a pot still. Typically, pot stills are going to be copper all over the world, especially in, I think there's one stainless steel pot still in Scotland. I don't remember who uses it. And typically Japanese whiskey is very inspired by Scotland. And all of the other pot stills that I know of in Japan are solid copper or copper bottom. This one is all stainless steel. I don't know how much difference that makes, but it's certainly an interesting choice since they're really breaking tradition. Another interesting thing about this is it says right there, each batch is a little bit different. This one is 42.3% ABV, and that's actually cask strength for this. Because it's rice whiskey, they end up putting it in the barrel at a way lower proof than would even be legal for Scotch or for American whiskey, for that matter. It goes in at only 46%, which the minimum is usually 60%. And I think from the descriptions that I've heard, the lower the proof is, the more sweetness you kind of pull from the barrel. And then this is aged entirely in sherry casks. They've got a sherry edition and a brandy version. I've only had the sherry, but I'm gonna take a couple sips of this delicious Japanese whiskey while you talk about your final pairing of the evening. Did we lose Dennis? I think we lost Dennis, guys. All right, Dennis is back. Sorry about that. There were some swamp gases that were ignited, and
ectoplasmic activity.
Yeah, ectoplasmic sun flares, solar flares. Sorry, but I was just throwing it over to you so you could talk about your final pairing.
Oh, fantastic! All right, I have a thing or two to say about this, but let me introduce it first, and then I'll get into that after. My last pairing of the night comes from another Jersey brewery called Magnify, and kind of a funny name to it, Accidental Text on Purpose. It's another double IPA, also 8%, like my last double IPA. And the difference with this one actually is really it's that really classic hazy IPA. Although not sort of, I guess it's hard to tell with the camera, but it's not really as thick in the haze
it doesn't look like what I would call like a hazy IPA. Like I've noticed this trend of unfiltered IPAs calling themselves hazy.
Yes.
And it's like,
it's trendy.
I mean, it's hazy, but it's not like a hazy IPA. Like when I think of hazy, I think of this.
Oh yeah,
I think
for
of
sure.
like
It's got the
light barely gets
juice
through it. But like I don't know, there's this trend of it. Like I'm gonna hold up my light to it. Like you don't even see the light through that, barely.
Oh yeah.
But there's this trend of calling that I've seen it called a Northeast IPA, which is like, I mean, that's not
which is weird. Yeah, it's definitely not, for sure.
But I would hesitate to even call that a hazy these days, because hazy has become known as opaque.
Yes.
Hazy doesn't really mean that it's just unfiltered or cloudy. Those are, I mean, I guess hazy is a word that can describe it, but
it's become this not buzzy sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like it's taken on a life of its own.
So, and before I have a point on that too, but before I get into that, Magnify is really cool. It's this brewery that has all these weird, crazy beers, and they're really known for their sort of breakfast IPAs. They make these wild IPAs, usually in the double range, so 8% plus. And they've got like, one of them was peach short stack, so it was basically like pancakes with syrup and peaches in an IPA, and they've been killing the market with that stuff. We've got
a brewery doing that kind of thing too out here. When I was saying before that there's basically two breweries that do like the lactose style Northeast IPAs. One of them is called Greater Notion. They make amazing IPAs.
Oh yeah.
But a lot of the really popular ones are in their pancake series, which are apparently, I've never actually had one, just because it didn't. One of the ones that they had when I was there was blueberry pancakes, and I hate blueberries. So I figured I'd rather just find out some other time when they have strawberry pancakes or something like that.
Well, I'll happily put myself on the line on your behalf and actually try it for you.
The problem is they don't. Well, I guess they did start canning within the last couple weeks, but
so maybe next just time like a local pickup growler thing?
Well, so they didn't even do growlers. They turned into somehow almost immediately they turned into a New Jersey style brewer, where people would wait outside for they only would put they had a crowler machine. They only do crowlers, no growlers, and they don't do any crowlers to order. On Saturday mornings, they can a bunch of stuff in crowlers, and then first come, first serve, and it's always gone by.
I hate that. That is a Jersey thing. You're right. You're right. It sucks.
And it's weird because they're the only place in town that does that, but people love it. So I've had a couple beers there, but it's just weird being able to drink beer but not being able to take home any of it. Yeah, that's
very strange. And my point of contention really is sort of with this new haze craze that we've seen over the last 8 months, 10 months, maybe a little bit more, where people just want to put lactose into everything. And I had a beer a couple of days ago. I was telling you earlier, I had a beer, man. I'm not going to say who it was. That beer was so phenomenal. The hop profile was killer. It was such a good IPA. It was a double IPA, actually. And the only thing that ruined the beer was the lactose. Had they just said, let's throw some oats in there to carry the flavor of the hop, which it does really well, or some wheat, like flaked wheat, then that'd be fine. But the lactose, unfortunately, took away from a lot of the hop character, and we see a lot of beers coming out today with lactose.
Well, and that's a weird thing, because that's kind of the intention of lactose. The intention of lactose in a IPA is because it softens the hop profile.
Yeah.
in kind of an extreme way. Like, I wish now, like, I'm just thinking about it. I wish that there was a beer that they did a lactose version and a non-lactose version, so you could
That'd
taste
be cool.
the difference. But in all my experience, I found that it rounds out every sharp edge that those hops have, and I mean, in some sense, kind of neuters the hop flavor because it just like kills that long hoppy finish that sometimes you want in like a double IPA.
Yeah. And I think, honestly, that not only affects boil hop character, but also post-boil hop character for the aroma.
Uh-huh.
And I think it really subdues the aroma in a lot of ways. And today we see a lot of breweries coming out with beers that are really heavy in Nelson hop, right? And that's a very tropical flavor. It's very noticeable, very intense. A lot of those cool mango, citrusy kind of flavors and aromas. And that gets sort of cut down in half by the lactose. Unfortunately, because it's so trendy.
Yeah.
Just like the glitter IPAs.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
I never want to drink that. Apparently, my wife was telling me that I think it's like Starbucks or something has some glittery drink now.
Oh, God.
Might be Dutch Brothers. But some coffee place has a glitter coffee now.
At this rate, the way I see this happening, the haze craze coming to its apex is going to be basically people taking hazy IPAs and dehydrating them and selling them in capsules or something where you can chew on it. That's going to be the next thing. The future.
But the capsules have glitter in them, of course.
They have glitter, yeah. For effect. So I like the beer. It's a good standalone beer, the one that I'm drinking now. And I just don't think that it does a good job for the cigar.
So for me, this Ohishi, I forgot to hold it up before. So the really interesting thing about this is having an all rice spirit makes it it makes it mild on the palate. Like if this wasn't aged in a barrel, it would taste kind of like there's actually two things that it does. It makes it more viscous. So you can see.
I was going to say syrupy, maybe.
Yeah, you can see that it's almost syrupy there. Like, man, this camera never picks up what I want it to pick up. But it's got a little more viscosity than a normal whiskey or spirit would have. It reminds me a little bit of trying to think of what the oiliest Islay Scotch I know of is.
Ooh, that's a good question.
Like maybe like Ardbeg Ugadal is really, really oily.
It is, yeah, actually, yeah.
Tongue. It's got those really long legs, and it's got like that mouthfeel where it's like 5% thicker than a regular whiskey would be. And this has that, but I think if you had the regular spirit, it would be kind of like drinking vodka that's 5% thicker.
Yeah.
Which would be bizarre, but anyway, it's the spirit itself doesn't influence the flavor very much, is what I find. It adds a little bit of sweetness and it adds that viscosity, but you end up tasting way more of the barrel, and it's got like that bitter barrel note with the sweetness and the kind of almost astringency, I guess, of the sherry, where it's got like that really sherry always makes me think of strawberry. I don't know why. I feel like sherry tastes kind of like a strawberry sweetness, and you end up with way more of that because you're not getting much influence from the whiskey itself, or from the spirit itself, rather. Dude, it amps up every flavor in the cigar.
Oh, really?
Every flavor in the cigar like goes a notch or two up. It's really good. This is a very good pairing. How's your IPA go with it? I'm guessing not.
Oh, man. Unfortunately, because of the lactose, no. And in general, I would say, honestly, yes, an IPA would not really pair well, especially not a traditional IPA with this cigar. But I think my second pairing with a lot of that lime sourness did pretty well where it was. But I can't say that any IPA would be good for the full cigar. maybe at a certain point, generally probably the middle of the cigar, the second, third, that would be cool. But all-around pairing, definitely not going to go with an IPA.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. Based on my experience with what is a incredible IPA, but just it ruins the flavor of the cigar, frankly.
And in a sense, I guess it also takes away from some of the flavors of the IPA. Depending on what you're drinking, but something with lactose, it really does sort of, it coats your palate in a way that doesn't allow you to really experience the full profile of the hops.
Mm-hmm. Which, like we said before, in like a milkshake IPA or some hazy IPAs, that's like a perfect marriage. Because like you get so much fruitiness from the hops, but you don't get as much bitterness, and you get so much sweetness from the lactose, and it works really well together. But I mean, that's just not always the case.
Yeah, you know what? As sweet as Connecticut broadleaf can be, it doesn't work well with something that has a more overpowering level of sweetness.
Yeah, and our final segment here, I'm gonna have to put this in post. I'm gonna edit it, and I'm gonna put it in where you left, because that was perfect timing, and that made me forget. This segment is brought to you by our good friends over at Drew Estate. We're gonna highlight a Drew Estate cigar. Dennis, what Drew Estate cigar should we highlight this week?
You know what? I've been hankering for the Norteño.
I don't remember if you said that last week or if Jason said that last week.
Oh, did Jason say Norteño? Hey, there's a reason for it. I love that cigar. There's a really good, and I think a lot of people love it too.
Those are amazing. They're just intensely spicy, which I love. But then they've got that balance
too.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
They really are. They're intensely spicy, but then they back it up with like that earthy characteristic of the San Andreas wrapper. Man, if you haven't smoked an Norteño lately, what are you doing?
In any size, man. I think that's a cool cigar.
And Evan Kirshner reminded me. Jason was the one who brought up the Norteño.
Oh, was it Jason?
Yeah. So I mean, I'm fine with that. They've only got so many cigars. We can't highlight a different one every single week for the rest of time.
But some cigars really do carry through for the long run.
Yeah, that just speaks to how good Norteño is. I think that's an underappreciated cigar these days. I feel like I don't see enough people smoking them, especially the. I saw one of our good friends, Shooter, was smoking one today or yesterday. He was smoking the Edición Limitada.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that cigar in that blend is fire. Like it's so weird because part of the thing that makes Norteño work is that it's got like that punch and that power.
Yeah.
And in that Churchill size, the Edición Limitada, it rounds out so well, and it's got like it's so much more elegant, but it's still got the same flavors. I feel like they nailed that blend. All right, and we're back. And if you're listening to the podcast, this is all out of order, but that's the way it goes. We've got a couple minutes left, so why don't we go back through our pairings? I was going to say we're finishing up here, but we've got a couple minutes left, so let's go back through our pairings. I'm going to check out my Old Weller.
And I don't know if you're getting this at all from the cigar, but for me at this point, I'm pretty much at the very end of the cigar, and I'm getting this really intense, almost like a toasted oak note. Yeah,
I was going to say it's very woody now.
Yeah.
And I'm nowhere near you. I'm like,
wow.
Point.
You've been talking, huh?
Yeah, I've been talking way too much. But yeah, it's got like this intense wood note now, and it's still got like that weird like snap of sour, the snap spice.
Definitely still there.
This is it's very interesting how different cigars can taste. It's all the same plant. You're just blending different strains of it that were grown in different places. And it's interesting to me that you can make something like this that tastes so different from everything else that's broadleaf out there.
Yeah, it stands out. As far as broadleaf goes, definitely stands out. Not what I expected, but in a good way.
Mm-hmm. I was expecting it to be kind of a powerhouse. And I think that, if you're a newer smoker who can't handle the nicotine hit that some cigars offer, I think this would mess your night up. But if you're an experienced smoker who smokes a lot of heavy stuff, I feel like this is a quite strong but really elegant broadleaf cigar that doesn't have the elements that most broadleaf cigars have. Like we were talking before about how like broadleaf is basically amazing no matter what.
Absolutely.
Like you slap broadleaf on a cigar and it's great no matter what. But being able to make like a cigar that's strong but complex and refined like this is kind of surprising to me. I expected it to be super earthy, super sweet, and it has both of those elements, but the finish is so short, it's amazing.
I think for me, I would definitely want to start my night off if I were out somewhere smoking a couple of cigars. This would be my first cigar for the night.
Mm-hmm. Like,
this would be a really good start.
I mean, I could see smoking this and then like a Habano that's medium.
Yeah.
And that's just really surprising to me because I'm used to broadleaf tasting like the last cigar of the night. It's the cigar that you're gonna wake up in the morning and your mouth tastes like broadleaf.
And you're still gonna taste it. Yep.
Yeah.
And you're gonna brush your teeth and then you'll still taste it.
Yeah. And this cigar just doesn't have that, which is so weird to me. All right. Well,
it's a different experience to bring it to that level of refinement too. It's not always easy.
Now we're almost there, so I'm going to go back through my other pairings. Yeah, the IPA just like covers up all the flavors in the cigar. I mean, I probably should have known better. I wanted to do one beer tonight, and this was the closest thing I had to a beer that would go with this. I probably should have. I've got a couple of stouts that I've got in hiding, and I probably should have gone with one of those. So now I'm going to taste the Ohishi and see how that goes on the second pass. Man, like, dude, that Ohishi, it's such a sherry bomb. Like, if you think, I don't know, if you think like that Oban Distillers Edition or the Talisker Distillers Edition is like a sherry bomb, you need to try this. Like, this is double the sherry. This is
on my list
sherry
for sure.
influence. But it brings out so much in the cigar. Like, it really just turns up the flavors a little bit, which I love. My pairing of the night is absolutely... I'm going to hold up the bottle for our YouTube and Facebook viewers here. Ohishi Whiskey Sherry. This whiskey just pairs with everything I've tried it with. But this cigar in particular, it really, like, turns up the flavors a little bit. Which
Personally,
one is your
I love
pairing?
sherry anything.
Right?
Sherry cask anything is phenomenal. I love it.
Well, and that's what John and I have talked about before. I've never seen sherry at a store. I've never had an opportunity to buy sherry. But I feel like based on my feeling on it from a whiskey standpoint, I would really like sherry.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I've actually been able to find a couple, and they've all been awesome.
I'm gonna have to hunt some sherry down because, sherried whiskeys just go so well. But also, I feel like sherry is one of those things that once you open it, you're not gonna be able to just keep it in your liquor cabinet like I do with this.
Oh no.
So, I might have to get sherry drunk one of these days.
That sounds good. My pairing of the night is, I have to say, it's going to be this vulgar display of flower from Equilibrium in New York. I mean, these guys really hit it on the head. It was such a weird IPA that I don't think I've ever experienced it. Even sour IPAs don't match up to this in that level of tropical fruit, heavy lime, still some bitterness from the hop, and then that edge that carries the cigar. So for me, that's definitely the best pairing of the night. If you're going to go for an IPA, go for something that's more, I'd say, more tropical and not heavy in lactose, which is hard to find, I guess, these days.
It's not hard to find out here. We have a lot of, like, the trend out here for the last 15 years or so has been ultra hoppy beers.
You also have access to the freshest hops in the U.S.
Yeah, that's true. We have a lot of hops around here, but that's the way it goes. It's weird because the stuff that's not available here I want, and the stuff that's available everywhere else, everybody else who has all that stuff wants what we have. It's a weird dynamic. I should probably do more beer trades, but we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the pairings, and unfortunately for you guys, we're done for the evening. So thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you to all of our Facebook Live viewers for watching. A special thank you to all of our Armed Forces Radio Network listeners. We appreciate you guys out there doing things that we're not built to do and protecting our freedoms. And remember, I've been forgetting to say this lately. John reminded me last week. I think I forgot on like 2 episodes in a row.
Oh, really?
But we want you to drink better. And we want you to drink less.